I promise you, it's easier than you think to create interesting, complex looking, layered backgrounds. And to achieve that, we're going to use a couple stencils, a napkin for a focal point. I'm also going to use a couple stamps. So let's get started. So I'm using this bird's nest with eggs napkin, and this came from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box. Now there are 4 images, two of each kind, and I just rough cut them out. That helps me get a better idea of how it's going to fit on the page. And right now at the beginning I'm thinking I might put both of these on the background on my 9x12 Canson mixed media. But before I make that final decision, I'm going to peel off the 2 excess layers, and I am going to use my fine line liner brush with a little bit of water to water cut the excess napkin off. And what you do here is you put a small amount of water, and I mean small, and run the brush along where you want to cut it out. Go slowly and in section by section, editing the image as you might. Now I'm not sure I wanted to use these pussy willows. I love them, but not for this. They didn't seem to quite go because this is an apple tree and the pussy willows were there and I was just confused. So I'll save them for another project. I'm just cutting off the excess. I like to go as close as I can. This gives me a deckled edge and it disappears more completely when you glue it on. So now that I'm happy with that, I do watercut the other one. Here's the one. I'm thinking, oh, do I want these? Nope, nope. So here's the one, and I did watercut this one. I just didn't bother to show it all to you. I don't like that anymore. And I'm thinking the 9x12 is a little too big for this one by itself, so I size it down to my 7x10. Both of these are from the Canson Mixed Media. They're Canson Mixed Media paper. They come in a coil and I take it off the coil and that allows me to work on it flat, which makes my life so much easier. I'm using fluid matte medium from Liquitex to glue my napkin down. I'm putting some underneath and then I'm brushing on top. Being careful to remember that it will get, the napkin gets very fragile and I actually did end up ripping it. But I know that I'm going to be overpainting this in the end, so I'm not too worried. Now I broke off the one stem and that would allow me to move it wherever I wanted it. It just made it easier to glue it down in 2 pieces. So don't be afraid if it's too awkward and you can't quite get a handle on it. Cut your focal images apart and then glue them back together on the paper. So I'm just going to give this a good dry now and come back. Now I want to add some interest to my background. So you know those excess plies that I took off? I am going to glue them down with the fluid matte medium. Now this is going to give texture to my background. It also, well, you'll see in a minute when I start putting color on what happens. It's a really inexpensive, easy way of getting pattern and texture and variation in your background. And having variation in your background, that's what makes it interesting. All those layers. So I'm just gluing them down. I'm basically just ripping bits, layering them up. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 layers on top of each other. And I just spreading that around the background. Once that's dry, I'm going to colorize it. And I'm using, I think this is ultramarine blue and yellow green, and I'm spreading it with a makeup sponge. Now, wherever the napkin pieces were glued, take the paint a little bit differently. So you're getting pattern and that bringing out that texture. It's no longer a flat surface. So you can see how that's just giving it way more interest than if I had just put the paint there on the mixed media paper. I discovered this by accident, and now I want to do it on purpose to get effect. And I have tons and tons of excess napkin plies, and now I can use them in my backgrounds. So this is the color is the second layer here. So we put the napkin down, that was the first layer. The color with the makeup sponge, that's the second layer. We have lots more layers to go. But art journaling, mixed media, it's all about those layers, whether they're physical or just visual. And a lot of this is very visual. I'm just adding more paint, getting the colors that I like. So here I'm just pretending that this nest is in the tree and it's surrounded by branches. That's the look that I'm going for. So I grabbed this Faithful Tree stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and there is a link to their Shopify store in the description box and a coupon code as well. And I'm just using the blue and stenciling the leaves. Remember, I want to create this as if I'm in the middle of the tree and looking out. So I'm getting that blue, green, sky. So even though I'm using this stencil, I'm not using the entirety of the stencil. So any stencil that has a leaf motif would work if you wanted to duplicate this, if you didn't have this exact one. So when I'm creating these layers, I'm basically using the same colors that I had in the background. Just maybe a little bit darker. So then I grab this geonetting stencil and I want to brighten up the page a little bit, lighten it. And I like this stencil. It simulates the apple blossom that's in the focal point. It looks like a flowery motif. So now we have, this is layer 4. We've had 2 stencil layers, the color layer and the napkin layer. And I'm loving the look. Now I am adding interest to my focal image. I want to make it stand out a little bit more. It's very antique and very faded. So initially I was thinking to do this going vintage, and I think that would look lovely. But on this background, with the strong colors in the background, I needed to brighten the colors. So I'm putting it on using my small brush, and I'm putting some gesso, and then I'm coming in with some quinacridone magenta and just over painting the flowers. I'm going over where there were flowers, and then I'm adding more as I see fit. So I'm altering the composition a little bit, like right here. There was no flower. So I can add as many flowers as I want at the same time as brightening the color. And when I mix the gesso, the white gesso with the color, you get a lot of that shading and interest on the flowers. Again, I'm adding more flowers here. So when you look at this in real life, it doesn't look like it's just a napkin that I glued down. I've added more to it. It looks like I've painted it. Hands up if you like the background, but I'm not done with the background. That's 4 layers. we're going to add more. And here I'm painting the leaves, again, just to darken them, brighten them, make the focal image stand out. So I use some Hooker's green and I'm shading with some black here. I come in, I highlight with some white, all with the intent of making the focal image stand out a little bit more against a strong background. Adding the brown in, and I'm going to get a fine line brush and I'm going to paint the nest with brown and black and white. I'm just using what that artist had given me in the napkin, and then I'm making it my own a little bit. And remember, nobody is going to know, you're not going to hold the napkin right up against it and say, here's the real thing and here's what I did. People, when they see it, they're going to see only what you've created, and it's going to look wonderful. Now I grabbed this stamp. This is from a Stampers Anonymous set, Tim Holtz set, called Reflections. There's a script stamp, a text stamp, and a small number stamp. I love the size of it. It makes for a nice detail. And I'm just putting black acrylic paint on the stamp and then using it to add a little bit fine detail. So that's layer 5 to the background. And when I'm stamping, some of it's going over top of the focal image, and I like that effect. That's something I've just recently started doing. It helps meld the background and your focal image all together. So here I am trying to colorize the eggs, and I don't like the color that I did it, and for whatever reason, I guess I didn't glue it down properly. My napkin does rip, so I end up turning off the camera, and I do fix it. I think I should have left them more off-white. I think that would have looked much better. Here I'm just edging the page, but then I decide, I'm going to shade it. I want that diffuse more look. It's just what I prefer. So I'm using the angle brush and edging it. This is framing my page. And I can assess whether I think I'm done or not. Adding a little more shading to various portions of the focal image, the leaves, the nest. And then using highlight, adding some white. And because you have a napkin and you have more focal images, I can duplicate this and make all the changes that I think I should have done differently. So I have a silicone stamp set, letters, that is script. So I just lined it up on my page, and I'm putting on black acrylic paint with a makeup sponge and then just stamping. And they kind of join together, making it look like script. So I'm stamping the word spring, and then I'm going to use a sentiment from my Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack. I like combining the different kind of sentiments, the stamped as well as, and then the copied or printed off. So that says spring, and this says a time for new beginnings. And this I shrunk down and printed onto sticker paper, which makes it super easy. Here I'm using a very fine dot stamp and adding some more black acrylic paint, just a little bit of dots on it. So that's layer 6. Adding some black dots to the centers of the cherry blossoms or apple blossoms. I also used my General's charcoal pencil. You'll see in the pictures at the end, I went around the flowers, the petals of the flowers with the charcoal pencil, and that just defined them a little bit more. And layer 7, some splatter. I'm using pink just to introduce a little bit of that pink, otherwise that's in the flowers, into the background. I love how the background turned out. All those layers peeking through just makes me happy. Until next time, go get creative. Go build some layers. Have fun.